The only reason I really was able to do this is because when you're sleep deprived for 3 days or a couple days, get messed up.
Well, if you told the woman, you're like, I have to get away every seventh day. Like I get 45 minutes of dad time every 7 days. Is that how you sold it?
No, well, no, it was an easy sell. She's used to me working out at 7 days a week or leaving the house for 2 hours for 7 days a week. So if you only leave once a week, I mean, she was sold.
You're winning.
Yeah,
absolutely. Coach, what's going on?
What's going on, man? Sorry to hold you up. Nothing makes you feel like a meathead more than when Zoom doesn't work. I thought I was going to crack this thing.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, no. We had, our first 5, it was my sound wasn't working. His sound wasn't working. Both wasn't. My face wasn't coming on his. It was a complete cluster screw.
Oh, it's unreal.
Yeah.
It's unreal. I went down the hall, grabbed one of our IT guys. He's like, just try. It's like, next time I'm going to break it, just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually, I mean, Dustin, I don't know about you, but whenever I was at Fort Knox and Fort Bliss, we had an issue, as a DoD strength and conditioning contractor, we go to the S shop and they would tell us oh, have you restarted it yet? Like, yes, I've restarted my computer multiple times. Did you restart it?
I didn't have internet for the first year, so
that's also true.
Issue. I didn't have a computer for a year and a half. And those IT guys, they get a little salty because they're used to going into some general's office and being like, man, I tried everything. And the guy goes, maybe plug it in and then we'll work from there. And the guy's like, oh. They just deal with the dumbest stuff.
That's
constantly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So Coach Witherspoon, can we call you Zach today?
Please.
Okay, awesome. So Zach, really quick, how old are you?
I'm 30 years old.
That's incredible. So give us real quick the rundown. I know Dustin and I have done a lot of stalking, and we know your progression, but talk to us from when you were in high school, when you finally got the bug, to get into strength and conditioning, and then to where it is now. Kind of extrapolate that over time. Take as long as you want. Just go over your story.
Awesome. So I'm fortunate because I'm one of the strength coaches this is what I always wanted to do. Grew up playing sports, was always the kid who needed as much help as I could possibly get to be athletically competitive. My dad was a personal trainer in the Knoxville area with some pretty high level athletes. Pat Ryan was an NFL quarterback. Mike DeFelice was a major league catcher. So got to be around those guys, be around him training those guys on his own. And that's really where I got the itch of, okay, I want to do this. What is this? What is this career? What is this field? Then, played football, high school, end up at Carson Newman University, which is this tiny little Division II school in Upper East Tennessee. Still to this day runs the split back veer. And went to play wide receiver there. So that was an experience for sure. But that's where I enrolled in exercise science there, stuck with that throughout, had a phenomenal course load there that really prepared me for a variety of things from the scientific side of this field. And then the internship portion pushed me to what is now EXOS. It was Athletes Performance at the time. So came out, did my internship at EXOS. Went back, finished my final year of undergrad, was playing football, was coaching strength and conditioning for the men's and women's tennis team. One of the professors there was the head coach and allowed me to program for that team. So really was trying to get my hands on athletes all I could at that time. All the while kind of training with a West Side version, I'll say, in the football side of things. We had the equipment, but not necessarily the methodology. And then from there, it was to University of South Florida just for a very, very brief period of time. And they had a staff turnover as soon as I got down there. And it was kind of one of those deals where you're going to go and you're going to intern for the summer. You'll be a GA in the fall for us. And right before I started that, the head strength coach was let go there. So I was more or less a sitting duck intern, didn't know where I was going to go. And through connection in my hometown, the head coach at New Mexico State University was Doug Martin, and he's an Oak Ridge guy as well. Reached out to him, said, I'll come work for free. I'll do whatever you want. He put me in the weight room there under Don Decker, who was a strength coach at Ole Miss and Arkansas for a long time. Still heavily involved with the CSCCA, phenomenal mentor for me. And the rest is history. I was there for almost 7 years with men's basketball, top assistant with football, got heavily involved in the sports science side of things from there. And then one day the LA Rams called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in a job?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would be interested in a job." And then showed up and to a phenomenal culture and a phenomenal roster, and fortunate to be part of a Super Bowl run. So it's been a wild ride, but I wouldn't change it for anything.
Gotcha. When you were at Carson Newman, was that 08 through 12?
So it was 10 through 14.
10 through 14. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And you played all 4 of those years?
I did.
Okay. What did you take from that when you were actually playing the sport at Division II, but nevertheless, like collegiate level? What did you take from that and started applying that to when you went to South Florida or when you went to like New Mexico? Was there anything you took in smallly from that experience actually playing, relating? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's something that I still draw on. Obviously, these guys are in a different stratosphere. Being able to speak the language from an athletic perspective, I played wide receiver, so being able to talk route trees, being able to talk edges and angles, and as far as a change of direction of this cut's going to look similar to a speed out, or this angular drill that we're doing with the quarterbacks is going to look similar to a naked boot, and being able to put it in context, I think that really helps them with some movement stuff on the field. Mm-hmm. Then as far as the weight room goes, just really understanding the total demands. That stress is cumulative, right? Understanding the demand that's on these guys, having just a little bit of context for that is great. And then it's also been useful for me in terms of return to play standpoint. We're going to have injury, we're going to return to training, then return to play. But to be able to bridge that gap where training looks like play, and speak that language with the athlete, that's been huge for me. And I got the best of both worlds at the time. As a receiver in a veer offense, you're thinking, what am I doing? Because we're not throwing the ball, right? We're going to run 55 times a game, and all you're doing is blocking it, grit work. But it gave me this context between skill players being one, but then also the lineman, where it is a thankless type of position, and you're really it's about the work and the craft and loving the game itself. Just understanding those two different kind of subsets of the same population. It's been super useful for me having played at the college level for sure.
Yeah. When you were in New Mexico and you said one day you got a call from LA. So how'd that happen? Because you don't just get a call. I don't just sit here and get a call from Alabama. So how'd that happen? Don't lie.
I'm still waiting for the call.
Legit. So some people still don't believe this story. Like this story and how I met my wife, people don't believe either one of these stories. But
give us both then.
Give us both.
Yeah, give us both.
So we had just finished a men's basketball lift. I get a call from Jock McClendon, who is our director of football affairs here. And we have an incredibly integrated performance staff here between sports medicine, strength conditioning, sports science, and then football affairs or player engagement, as some other places call it, are all integrated together so that the athlete truly stays at the center. So they were looking for somebody to come get data process off the ground within the weight room. Good strength conditioning methodology, but really wanted to be able to track, dial in the loading and what's going on with the stress of the athlete through the training cycles. At New Mexico State, we had a bar tracking technology called Elite Form. We were one of the first 12 schools, I believe, with them. So I had intimate idea of what it's like to onboard that technology, how it works with the athlete, all of those things, all while still being a strength coach on the floor. So they wanted someone who could do both and go between both rooms, because at the time, sports science was more or less housed in the sports medicine side of things within our building. So brought me in to do that, came under Tyler Williams, and really the rest is history. But Jock called me and said, I'm familiar with what you've done with Elite Form. He found out through another colleague who he went to University of Tennessee with.
Okay.
And it just all circles back to this very small world. We need a name. I know a guy. I had never met anyone in this building before actually getting the job, which surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that interview like? Or was there an interview?
Yeah, absolutely. There was. So they sat down with me and met with our dietitian, the director of sports science at the time, our director of performance or vice president of performance, and the head strength coach. And it was a full-on gamut of questions about philosophy as a strength coach, because that's an important thing. It's important to me, and it's important to them here that I'm a strength coach first. I have this sports science background that I think is valuable, but I don't ever want to lose the forest for the trees, so to speak. So that first and foremost, and then also implementation strategies, how I worked with others and things like that, because in a sports science type of role, you end up kind of getting into other people's lanes a little bit. And I think that that's one of the more difficult aspects of this type of role, but really just to get a feel for the person, hit it off with those guys, and it's been a phenomenal place to be.
Yeah. Do you going from college to the NFL, what was that culture like? What was that? Was it a culture shock for you, or was it more a culture like ease in? Was it more of like laid back?
So our culture here is we're very standard driven, but it is these guys are pros. These guys have a process. These guys are very in tune with what is going on, what is being asked of them. So I kind of describe it in a college setting. You dictate every single thing that goes on within that room during those periods of time. If you so choose, guys aren't doing a set unless you hit the whistle, right? In an NFL weight room, these guys don't need that and really don't even appreciate that. Yeah. So you want to give them a level of autonomy and be facilitating in that way. And rather than dictating the room, you're working the room. For me, that there was a little bit of an adjustment there, but it was okay because the men's basketball side of collegiate athletics is very much the same way, just as far as personality. And I was having to do both at New Mexico State, so I could kind of switch gears, so to speak. So that was great. As far as the caliber of athlete and the caliber of training, and that was not so different for me, just because at New Mexico State we were constantly trying to push for development and to be on the cutting edge, because you're really trying to make it a winning program there. And we had a lot of influence on the program, which we're thankful for. Here, you're trying to get the top 1% better. So it's a similar thought process with maybe just a slightly different aim. So a little bit of an adjustment, but it didn't so much feel like a shock.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. When you walked on to that, you've been there now 2 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So this last year's Super Bowl run, when you were watching that roster get assembled, because I was in Texas when it was getting assembled. Like Dustin was, he still is in Washington State, just watching it, just piece after piece after piece. And midseason, Odell piece. Yeah. These pieces go on. Let me ask you this. I mean, all three of us have dealt with this at some point in our lives, but in my mind, until you get to an NBA weight room or an NFL weight room, it doesn't really come into play as much until you get there, where you have an abundance of egos that you have to work around. Now, when you're working around athletes that have that, now, does that go back into what you're saying? So they don't appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So you just work the room. You're there as a reference piece for them, as a tool to use. Or are there any aspects you see of major egos in professional sports you have to learn how to balance in our profession?
I truly, and this is not blowing smoke at all, we are super, super fortunate. We really do not have that on our roster. And some of that is just leadership at the top. Coach McVay, phenomenal from the top down, has achieved a ton as a young coach, has no ego with how he interfaces with the players. So that sets standard from the jump. Then you have your Matthew Stafford, your Aaron Donald, your Cooper Kupps, who have Tyler Higbee, who have zero ego whatsoever in terms of the process. And it's collaborative. So it takes ego out of it when we're kind of interfacing with each other as equals there. To me, it's just treating the athlete as the human being first, which you hear about across coaching everywhere. If you're doing that, it really kind of pulls down all barriers, and I can be vulnerable with you of, here's what I think is best. Here's what I think is maybe not best about what we're currently doing or how we're currently trending on whatever variable or whatever movement or whatever it is. So we haven't had to deal with that in a large fashion. Honestly, you deal with it some in a college aspect where you get a highly touted player or a player who thinks that he should be at a better school, and he has an ego about it. And that's what I felt way more clashes at that level than I do here in our building now.
Okay. All right. Did you ever, when you were starting your career, like really like at New Mexico State, did you have a solid base? Like everyone says, and I guess it should be this way, everything's dictated by the position you're in, the tools you have, the people that are on your staff, athletes you're working with. So there really is no one set system. But at the end of the day, if you had to knee-jerk reaction, what is the base of your coaching philosophy?
Absolutely. It's evolved. And so I'll kind of walk you through maybe the journey and then where it is
better.
So being under EXOS first was a good place to start in terms of an integrated model of performance, right? Understanding return to play from the training room table to the performance room floor. That was great. But as far as and it's a super sound methodology, total body, 4-day split, push-pull emphasis, upper-lower emphasis, woven all the way through. You get your own, but you can lose some of the big rocks within that methodology very easily when you apply it just to the college sector. It doesn't, to me, fit as well on your freshmen, on even some of your sophomores. You developing that base like your big rock barbell exercises, right?
Okay.
So coming out of EXOS, going to train men's and women's tennis at Carson Newman, I'm taking EXOS type of model, and that worked okay there, right? Every time you look back on a training program, you can easily identify some things that you would do differently. Then getting to New Mexico State, Coach Decker came up under John Stuckey. So, it's the squat, press, and clean methodology straight up. And you're on a barbell every time you're in the weight room. And so feeling that almost the complete pendulum swing there, and really understanding how to coach people on the platform around the barbell, really develop the strength and power qualities that we want to develop. And then full transition over to the NFL side of things, where these guys have a high training age, an incredibly high output ability, and we have a very limited amount of time to train them all the same way. They're coming from various lifting backgrounds, even just in terms of an off season. So you have to be a little bit more selective with your exercise selection, with what methods you're choosing to use, given the stressors on the field. So then it's kind of arrived at this blend where we've got to push power. We've got to choose our moments for max strength to drive power in this sport, especially the closer you get to the football in the trenches. So we're going to choose those things and we're going to move load, but we also have to be choosy and find strategies, special exercises that can allow us to load the athlete in the most orthopedically sound and safe way. So to me, you boil it all down to a nutshell. I'm about doing simple things savagely well, and we've got to be able to quantify everything we're doing, and we got to make sure that we're in the right play call for the athlete. So we're going to fit the athlete, or we're going to fit the movement to the athlete, not the athlete to the movement. That, like, in a nutshell, that's what it's about for me at this point.
Okay.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Did that come from any base philosophy? Like, you looked at, for example, and I'll use me for example. Whenever I'm writing something, the first thing I look at, I think of like a West Side Conjugate sample, and then I take it from there, and then I extrapolate it. And by the time it's done, it's probably not anything like that. What
I
a
got
West
you.
Side.
Yeah.
But what's like the first one? You like tier system, and then you start working from there, or is it that EXOS and you start working it from there?
Yeah, I would say that the way that we program here aligns closer to EXOS,
Okay.
just with closer big rock exercises. And I mean, an EXOS system gives a lot of room, like you said, it gives a lot of room for flexibility to run. If it's my primary lower push day, I can use dynamic effort method as far as how I'm loading and doing those things. But it's definitely not a tier system. Not that there's anything wrong with tier system, but we just don't alternate that way. It's more of a 4-day upper lower split with emphasis, or 4-day total body split with an upper lower emphasis.
Sure.
Yeah. With those like certain emphases when you're going from out of season to in season.
Yep.
And you've already mentioned that you're dealing with that 1% of 1%. Yep. And a lot of them at that point, they've plateaued. Like you can pretty much do whatever you want with them and they're not going to get any better. They're freaks, but they've topped out their freakness.
Yep.
Give me a most recent example of, you don't have to name a name of an athlete, but you have athlete A stalled on event or lift or movement. And what have you done to spike that?
Correct. So we've used a lot of the Hawkins squat variations. So we'll be driving a squat pattern. We use a lot of safety bar here. In season, we're going to go to predominantly unilateral load, and then we're going to track power outputs over time with that. So if a guy is starting to stall on his power outputs, then we'll go to from a non-hand supported to a hand supported. Obviously, an extra base of support is going to allow us to continue to drive the stuff up, but then circle back, audit that on a single leg jump off of a force plate. Now we see his power metrics go up. So that's the most common one that jumps to mind. You see that holistically across. And then some of the stuff that we deal with in season is a general fatigue issue. So being smart with how you're programming those moments of high power outputs or high strength outputs within your lifts, be it over the course of weeks. We like to use strength and power checkpoints because some weeks, you play a very physical game, like you play the 49ers on Sunday. Your lift, it's going to take you till the next Thursday to be back right. So your Monday and Wednesday lift are going to look different as far as outputs. So we try to check in with those high points quarterly. And like you said, it's a war of attrition for us. We are holding on throughout the course of a 17-game season plus playoff.
Right. Yeah, if we can stick on that unilateral leg drive load, because I know the Dustin and I are really big on unilateral like squat patterns.
Yeah.
Dustin, do you want to chime in on that? I know you're a big fan.
I'm a big fan. Just from, well, I think we're laying this out pretty well, because you were talking about these big rock movements that you kind of hang on. As far as carry over into positions, what positions do you find that are utilizing maybe these more single leg patterns? How are you implementing them to kind of carry over onto the field? I guess that's tending where I use them is you can mimic a lot of movements that people are making on the field around a court with unilateral single leg stuff. And, I don't have the metrics to prove like, oh, this just carried over a lot better than doing a front squat, but feel that way. I feel like there's also kind of an injury prevention aspect that kind of comes into getting into some of these positions that you just don't achieve that with some other movements. The other thing is I feel like I can coach someone into some single leg stuff much easier than some other movements. I can always tweak something to work someone into a good position, whereas sometimes it's a little bit more challenging actually with other things. But I guess what movements are you utilizing? What do you like? And, kind of what positions are you utilizing them for?
Yeah. So positionally, obviously our skill players are utilizing them the most. The strength coach, John Griffin on our staff, who is specifically with skill guys, is phenomenal at programming, engaging stuff for those guys. And he relies on it heavily, specifically in season. Like you said, it's a position that they feel safe with, and they therefore will load. And then with our offensive mids, we're using that as well. We want to develop the reservoir of strength with a bilateral pattern with those guys. But they're using that as well. The linemen, you'll definitely see it in there, but it's more as an auxiliary, less of a primary type of thing. And then I think there's a spectrum of positionally the strong points for those groups. For instance, a lineman is in a split stance or a variation of a split stance very, very often. So you can load them in a split stance, but putting them in a reverse lunge pattern where it's truly a moment of being unsupported, they might not feel as comfortable.
Sure.
Skill players would be, or a step up, things like that. So you're seeing some variation with that. And then we run the gamut. We go split squat, we have reverse lunge, we have a step up, we go split stance trap bar deadlift, rear foot elevated of all your split squats, and then people have different names, but the rear foot elevated trap bar deadlift, it's like a very big in hockey. We've done some of that as well. And one thing that we found over the course of an NFL season, it's a long year, so variation is very, very important. Of spending 2 to 3 weeks on a certain movement, moving off of it, and moving into a different way of loading.
Yeah. How much on that heel elevated trap bar deadlift? How many degrees are you elevating their heel? Do you have wedges or? Do you just
sorry. Rear foot elevated trap bar deadlift.
I'm so okay. Yeah. Okay. So like a Bulgarian split squat.
Correct. Just
with an open trap bar. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So you prefer that over having whole dumbbells?
No, it's not a preference at all.
Okay.
Just as far as a loading, it's a lot easier to put 225 on that trap bar and put a guy in a position for that. We utilize that heavily during the return to play last year with Cam Akers, who was phenomenal and came back and is a freak of all.
He's freak, yeah.
But just to really drive some unilateral leg strength for him. Because he was dealing with some asymmetry as he's coming back, obviously, off of an injury. So,
gotcha. You mentioned earlier, if the power output on a split squat, safety squat bar, split squat went down, you'd have to bring the hands into it, holding onto handles. Now, as you say, handles on the yoke or handles on like the rack, like a Hatfield?
Handles on the rack.
So my question.
I think I said Hawkins earlier on the Hatfield.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. So my question on that is, when you're going from them just holding the bar, holding the Hatfield handles, the power output's going to increase. Yeah, because you have more. You got to pull with your arms.
Correct. Absolutely.
My thing is, how are you regulating if their power output's going down?
Yeah.
On the regular, maybe that's their nervous system. I don't know. If they're grabbing it, are they just overdriving that nervous system, or how are you like keeping their nervous system from overdriving?
That's a great question. And honestly, in the NFL, I feel like you probably run into this in more weight rooms. Not. We program on the floor load and velocity.
Okay.
And then on the back end, we track power. So the athlete is not interacting with, I'm below a power threshold, but we're trying to regulate athlete output by prescribing loads and then prescribing a velocity range for them to be in. I know other places they might just go power output and then basically play high score, right?
Yeah.
We utilize the velocity. Now we do get some guys who blow through what we call a velocity floor. We say the floor is 0.8, right? And your reps are at 0.6s. That weight is too heavy. We need to go lighter. Right. But the education process, especially after a year of training that methodology, is getting better. But for us, that's kind of the catch point for that. If they're blowing through that velocity cutoff, then we know it's an issue. That way, if they're staying true to call it 0.8s and load is going down to drive power down, then we can very easily as a coach see on the floor, pull them off, check out, get into another movement. And then as far as on an individual basis, it's very difficult to say this. We've got some other mechanisms that hopefully we're catching neural fatigue or systematic fatigue before they get into the lift. Because if it's on the card, guys are going to do it.
Yeah.
And if you try to pull them off, once they're already in it, it's too late. They're here for a reason. They have grit. They will grind. So we try to catch that on the front end. But that's a great question. It's a really tough thing once you're within the session to deal with.
Gotcha. Are you guys using like perch systems to track that?
We use GymWare.
GymWare. Okay. Do you prefer that over perch? Or is it just there and that's what you have?
It's here. It's what
okay. Okay.
I have quite a few questions because you're kind of this awesome middleman that I think has to blend and speak a lot of languages, especially being on an integrated staff where it seems like you're doing things where a lot of people are really falling short. But before I get into that, have you noticed, and speaking over your whole career so far using technology, that we start to double up on things? If you're tracking, force velocity training and I'm looking at HRVs or something like that, I've started to realize, hey, if things are accurate and you've been utilizing them long enough, they're all saying the same thing. Do we need all these things to tell us the same answer? Are we just cracking more data than we really actually need to? Can you speak to anything there that you've noticed? You're like, hey, just knowing this guy's dropping off here, like I know that all this other stuff's gonna be off. I don't need to actually know all that anymore. Have you thought about things, looked at those things, tried to simplify stuff? Because you're in a unique position, I think, in our generation. There's some interesting things going on there that I think we might be doing stuff differently. 10 years from now, we might simplify things.
Absolutely. We're at a point in time from just the sports science side that we're trying to refine our processes rather than add new ones or more specifically add new pieces of tech. I've talked to a number of coaches recently having this conversation, and I was fortunate enough that early in this sports science process, I came to the realization that if you're looking at everything, you're kind of looking at nothing. They're one and the same. Mm-hmm. I would much rather have a really strong metric that I trust telling me versus having 3 arrows all pointing to the same thing. Because chances are we're just human beings. You get spread incredibly thin. You're not doing all 3 of those things very well. So you can't trust the accuracy of that information. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And sometimes I fall short in terms of, but it's great as far as our staff is set up, that with me being a strength coach as well as on sports science thing, Griff can come to me and say, bro, the implementation on this is just out of whack. We need to simplify this, dial it back, and refine our processes. So definitely find that a lot.
What are you looking at when it comes to return to play? Mm-hmm. I guess, what does that kind of that flow, that conversation look like when you're taking a player? I know this is a huge struggle at the collegiate level in my experience, where one, just having cross communication, that was poor. Speaking the same language as the person, the other sports science staff is speaking, because if I'm dealing with iron and they're dealing with this and someone can't speak both languages, or even with the surgeons, surgeons would come down and talk to coaches about stuff, and you're trying to all be on the same page with where that athlete is and where you want them to get to. I guess, what does that kind of look like for you, and how does it look different from, your collegiate experience versus NFL? And then are you looking at those metrics that you've already collected on an athlete and then saying like, hey, this is where we were, pre-injury wise, even mileage on the field, all those things, this guy's right where he was. Are you looking at all that?
Yep, absolutely. So the return to play process here is absolutely wonderful. We have the best sports medicine staff in the NFL, and they have injury statistics to prove it before I or anybody else on the strength and conditioning staff got here. So our return to play process is something that we're still continuing to upgrade and integrate with from a strength side of things, but very, very well established as far as a gamut of jump testing, especially for lower body injuries, right? Okay. And some force plate use for upper body extremity injuries as well. Then our integration, our 2 rooms are actually joined. You walk, you don't even go down a hallway to walk from the weight room to athletic training. So our communication is great. We're really trying to standardize those moments where it goes from rehab setting to true training setting to true return to play setting and what those phases look like. Because depending on who you're dealing with on staff, we all do things just a little bit differently, just from individuality. Really trying to drill down on that, but absolutely, we are evaluating jump metrics and comparing right to left asymmetry from a baseline or from a most recent jump stuff. As we're returning to field, we're programming off of their individual norms, also their positional norms. If it looks like they're going to have a role change, right? Say there's two guys at a position who are down, one guy's coming back earlier, his workload will probably be higher than what we would have expected it to be. So we need to periodize backwards from that way. Obviously you've got to give enough time on a ramp to get a guy ready to do that stuff. And then really trying to work on some change of direction stuff. And one thing that we do well here that was championed again before I got here, so I don't want to take credit, is some video analysis stuff. And not even full on into biomechanical analysis. Just film it on an iPhone or an iPad and look at it and see difference in a 45-degree cut right to left, and just work using some of the subjective data beyond just cueing. And it helps with the athlete buy-in as well, to send them the videos, to show them progress and things like that. That's another thing as part of our return to play that we've added that I think is really benefiting us. Yeah,
that's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's tough to, once you have a trained eye, it's something that I don't think people should overthink it. You should, if you have it, you should use it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, something that I've talked to Dustin about, I've talked to multiple coaches about, either professional or collegiate, and coming from the background I've come from, either collegiately or private sector wise, and you, coach, you did bring this up, that there's so much technology now. It's pulling you in so many different directions. You're trying to attack these 2 or 3 or 4 handfuls of minutia, little things here and there. And you're kind of doing this overall gray pattern as opposed to just a straight line. At the end of the day, if you only had your eyes or technology, which one would you use?
My eyes.
Yes. That's a great answer.
The whole organization here, the tech should confirm your gut. That's kind of the mantra around here. If it looks wrong, it probably is wrong. Yeah. I mean, it sounds weird because I have this sports science background, right? And people don't expect me to say things like that. But common sense has reigned supreme and has helped coaches help athletes to some record-setting performances before any of this stuff showed up.
Yeah. Well, and emotions and things like that. Like, you're reading body language at times where that'll tell you, if you spend enough time around a player, that'll tell you within seconds of seeing the look on their face. If they have a consistent, demeanor, you can see all that stuff. You don't need the confirmation, which makes me think if a coach has utilized, a lot of tech and really understands it and has seen that, I think they also have the advantage of stepping away from it and being a lot more self-assured that, things are going exactly the way they think they are, and they have a good pulse of what's going on.
For sure.
But I did get worried. I mean, the first NFL weight room I went in, there was 2 strength coaches and there were 7 sports science guys. And this is when I was really early in my career. And I was like, did I make a mistake? Like, is a floor coach going to be outdated? And I had a buddy that was getting ready to start his doctorate. And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to go the sports science way. Like, I like everything I've done up to this point, but it made me a little nervous because I was like, is this really changed the industry that much? But I couldn't step away from, basically what we're getting at right now is, that was when it was new age and we were just looking at all this stuff. I think that's what they were doing. They were looking at so many things. They needed 7 data crunchers and they didn't even know how to really, really utilize the data early on. Cause I mean, this is, 2011, 12. And I think there was a couple older coaches and then a bunch of young guys that were just crunching data, but were never stepping in a weight room. But I think they were just collecting at that time.
And you just lack context in that type of setting. If that's what you look at is just the numbers and the metrics, you can't go down the hall and have a conversation with a football coach about what the best option for tomorrow's practice is, or a position coach about how his guys are performing and how it's trending, and maybe how that is going to impact his individual session tomorrow. If all you're looking at are the numbers, you can't have a conversation. And at the end of the day, I don't think the floor is always going to be the most important thing in the weight room. If you can't interface with the athlete and get the athlete to buy into what you're trying to get them to do to make them better, it doesn't matter anyway. So, I mean, I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 5-10 years ago, like Dustin, that was, I remember seeing a lot of staffs amassing that. And it was like they'd have 2 or 3 strength coaches and 4 to 5 sports science people on their staff. And I remember when I was at James Madison, I was getting my undergrad in exercise physiology. The big thing was like the VO2 max. I don't know where it was where you guys were back at that time. We're all about the same collegiate experience, but time. And it was, you had to have a big VO2 max. You had to crush the VO2 max. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, this football player is probably going to do like 3 to 6 seconds,
Correct.
Barring someone returning a punt or, a crazy field goal episode or a home run pass. Like, I don't know if that really, I'd rather have them be able to steamroll somebody rather than get their VO2 max up.
Yep.
I just, and that was the first time I ever thought to myself, like, numbers don't play. And I guess, at the end of the day, like, you have to show improvement in some capacity, whatever your organization is geared towards.
Yep.
But this too, it can seem like over a month or 6 weeks, maybe the numbers and the volume goes down, and you have to present it every month or 2 months to the powers that be. And they're like, well, why are these numbers going down? And you tell them, well, the quality wasn't there. We brought everything down. Now the quality's there, but you wouldn't be able to do that unless you were there on the floor.
Right. Absolutely.
You wouldn't be able to do it.
That's a great point. I
mean, in professional football, how many guys are there doing what you guys are writing in season, and how many of them kind of do their own thing?
Oh, in season we have the entire roster. So you got the 53-man plus the I think it's 16-man practice squad.
Okay.
So you have that. You may have some individualized spinoffs of that based off injury, snaps, all those things, in terms of just being smart, doing what's best for the athlete. And then in the off season, during off season program, that roster is 90 plus. So it's much larger. With your rookies, your undrafted free agents. So you really have to be able to scale. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, at this level. It is such a finite window to get these athletes better that you're seeking individualization. But you have this roster size and this time limit that you have to be scalable. Everybody can't just be on everybody can't be doing a different exercise.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So really what we're looking at is categorization, and then being able to slide different categories in and out based off the athlete need, and really trying to utilize some of the data to help us drill down on what that is.
Okay. Yeah. That's always going to be the struggle, because this would be the absolute best thing if it's you and one player and that's it. And so you're trying to get as close. I mean, we're all trying to get as close to that in all settings as we can, but if not permitted, what things can you do to close that gap as tightly as you can, which is, it will forever be a struggle, because you're never going to have 90 coaches. So you're always just trying to figure out how to close that gap as close as you can.
Oh, yeah, those guys that are close to the fringe getting cut, how much harder are they pushing?
Kind of depends on the player.
Oh, okay.
I mean, realistically, some guys maybe aren't as aware that that might happen. Some guys are pushing harder. Some guys maybe aren't pushing as much in the weight room because they feel that the field is where they're being evaluated, which is true.
It's true. Yeah.
But you see it all over the map, and sometimes you shake your head as that guy just didn't get it. But we don't deal with very much of that.
Gotcha. But with the LA Rams, everyone on that team comes to play. Like, they don't have like their own guy or gal on the side, or coach, whatever. I'm gonna have my guy or gal sign off on a permission slip, and I don't see you.
So we have we have players who are incredibly invested in what they're doing during this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a break time. They're away from us. They know that they're going to come back and have to be in training camp. So we send them off. They're not all going to stay in Southern California. If we're in Green Bay, less people are staying. I mean, it's correct.
Probably.
So you have to be collaborative with those athletes, trainer, strength coach, whatever it is. So that's really what we seek to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that has made us more successful just holistically across outcomes in terms of with those players who are invested in their own process. If you're a $20 million a year player and you're spending your own money to make sure that you're ready, I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. So I'm not helping you. Then the relationship is damaged for when you come to the building.
Right.
So we want to collaborate. Here are going to be the game demands. Here's what we expect to see, because we have information that outside coaches maybe don't have. We know exactly what it looks like for a football player inside the LA Rams organization.
Right.
So we can utilize that to help the player and to help that strength coach better. But other than that, everybody is in the building, is training, and we are well versed in terms of what athlete A can do based off his orthopedic history and training background. If you went away for 5 weeks and didn't squat, I'm not going to squat you when you come back in training camp.
Right.
I just can't, because we're going to keep the main thing, and that's practice. And if you can't practice because you're wrecked from a back squat workout when I know you didn't squat, then I've got to be smart about that as well. So there's some flux within there, but everybody plays ball for sure.
Okay. Just one quick thing. So again, in a hypothetical scenario, you have this $20 million a year player. He's there. Are you saying you would actually be in communication with whoever is working with them, so you guys can?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Hi.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Coach, I'm Zach. I just want to touch base with on Matthew. This is what we've done. I'd love to hear about what you have planned for him. Here's what we're going to be asking him to do when he comes back. And then is there and we're met. That's welcomed from a lot of coaches, because it would suck to fly blind for 5 weeks. I wouldn't like it if the roles were reversed and I have an athlete that I have to prepare him for something that I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I've got a decent idea, and I don't know exactly what he's been doing. I can ask him. So we want to be collaborative from that standpoint. And really what it does is it expands your staff and it expands your buy-in.
Yeah. Do you find in the trend, and granted, you've only been in the NFL for 2 years, but while you were at New Mexico State, I'm sure you've shaken hands, rubbed shoulders with people. Do you find that in the NFL is slowly starting to increase? Guys like having their own personal dude or dudette?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're dealing with I was having this conversation with a player on our roster who's been in the league for quite some time about how has your process changed as you progress from a rookie to a veteran in this league in terms of your own physical process and your level of investment in it, as far as how much you're going to seek research, how much you're going to seek people who are doing different things. What was it like for you as a rookie? Did you have a trainer? Did you have a PT massage therapist that you like to go to, or has that just kind of accumulated over time? I think we're dealing with a group of athletes now, college, pro, private, doesn't matter. They want to understand the why and what's going on. And I think that at this level, if you want to have some weigh in on what the why is and what's going on, you can buy right into that as a pro athlete and go to a private coach and get all the individualized attention that you need. And I understand and respect that. So I think it's definitely becoming more prominent. I think as somebody who's employed by an organization, it's important to be able to interface with that and not totally cut that off, but then also understand that you have to be scalable. You have to understand that we've got to do what's best for the LA Rams performance as a total team, and we can't just change our entire methodology for this one player.
Right.
Oh, 100%. No. Do you have resources readily available to answer the why? They ask you a why. Like, do you have like a frequently asked question binder or like PDF you email out to those guys, like this is why?
To the coaches?
to the players. They're asking you why.
Most of that stuff is conversational.
Okay.
So really, and some of them, I wouldn't say that there's a ton of very frequently asked questions. You can get some very off the wall, because going back to more informed athlete, there's also this flood of information to the athlete now. Some of it maybe not so good. So you can get some very random questions as far as developing, energy system development. Should I hold my breath during this bike sprint?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Do that. Don't solve a maneuver.
I feel like those are the only questions I remember are the ones like that. It's always the questions where I'm like, how do I say this in the nicest way? Like, how do I say, like, stop doing that in the nicest way? Because it's always, I guess you said it right. It's off the wall stuff, or like, why I had to tell 3 athletes why they can't wear restrictive breathing apparatus on their face during workouts. Stuff, it's those kind of things, or whatever supplement they brought in that they got from the black market GNC in Florida or whatever it is. It's just it's all those kind of random things that come in, and it's always similar answers, but it's just knowing the person and how to best give them the response that is going to be helpful for them.
Correct. And thankfully, most of our guys it's very well intended. It is very well vetted.
Yeah.
But it may be, some of the more common ones right now is, I need to throw and run routes, or I want to do extra route work with my route guy. What are the best days to do that with our run volumes? That's an incredibly educated question.
That tells you where someone's at mentally.
You're consolidating stressors. Wow. Okay. Yeah. How many are you intending on running? What type of routes are you intending on running? Yeah. Maybe if you're throwing with someone and you've used up your reps for the day, maybe now we're just doing top of route stuff. Is that suitable for you? Absolutely. All right, cool. Great. Done. Those are more the type of questions we have. We have some.
That's awesome.
Some really, really educated guys.
That tells you exactly where the education level is on what's going on. If you start getting smart questions, gosh, that means good things are happening at that point.
Yeah. And going back to the ego thing, that's what's important too, because some of these guys will have a phenomenal performance idea of how to implement a specific drill that they want to be doing. To me, as a performance coach, I'm saying that's a football drill, but it accomplishes the same thing. They want to get that done. Well, if I do it this way, will that work? Yeah, that's a really good idea. I should have thought of that. Great. And then we can move forward. And it breaks down those walls, and we can collaborate that way.
That's a good environment. When productive things starts happening like that, that's good stuff.
Do you ever get that when like a player asks you their first really deeply educated question, and you kind of freeze for a second? That's happened to me multiple times, but it's great because as soon as they start getting that, start asking those smaller, like, nuanced questions, those devil in the detail questions, they start to get really good really quick. That's fun.
No doubt. And we've got, like you said, the roster getting assembled. Yeah. Watching that is unreal. Getting to interact with this roster is unreal because of who those big name guys are, at not just as players, but as people and as performers. It is, and I sound like I work for the Rams. We get it, dude. Like, oh, you're talking freaking Rams. Yeah. But no, these guys are the best in the world at what they do for a reason. How they approach it is absolutely unbelievable. And it's really, really pushed me to be better as a coach, just being around it. So it's phenomenal environment.
Yeah. True. Have you had the starstruck moment yet with anyone? Anyone? Like even not in the NFL.
Yeah.
Career, so, like you see, oh dang.
We were talking about this the other day. Yeah, today. And not really on the roster.
Okay, yeah.
They're like, the first time you meet Aaron Donald's different.
Okay.
But because everyone says Aaron Donald and he introduces himself as Aaron. And so that was kind of weird. You're like, oh man.
Okay.
and he's a monster. It's unreal.
Yeah.
And then, but then the other one is the national anthem ends at the Super Bowl, and I turn around just to back up onto the sideline. Right behind is Kanye West. I'll sing some Nachos.
I knew you were
this
gonna
guy's
say
like
that.
Kanye West.
No, I knew he's gonna say that. I knew he's gonna say something like that. I was going for 50 Cent in my head, but I
Oh,
I mean,
great halftime show, best one of all time.
and
So
yeah. And so that moment was the moment that this is a little different. Like, this is just a little different arena than I was in previously. But yeah, that was an interesting
But
moment.
you didn't introduce yourself to Ye.
Oh, no, nor did he acknowledge me.
No?
The Sean McVay lookalike stuff never pays off for me.
It didn't. I was gonna stay away from that, but now that you brought it up,
It's all good, man.
how did you land the gig? Because I got Dustin, I've never talked to you about this, but it's always been like my really weird, like deep-seated, like strength conditioning, like coach fantasy to be the guy that has to grab the belt of the head coach when he just loses his mind at some heinous call.
Yeah.
So how did you? I'm not taking anything away from you. Usually, everyone I've been around, it's always the head strength coach that does it. How
Correct.
did you net that job, especially as his doppelganger? How did you get that?
That's the question is the answer to the question. They're like, "Oh, you look like Coach McVay."
Everyone's.
Oh, you're gonna be his get back.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not, guys. Come on. No, they're like, oh, it's done already. You have no say in the matter. It's done. So, which he's phenomenal about it. Otherwise, I would probably have to shave my head or something. Yeah. But
you weren't going out of your way to do like little extra things, like see what kind of socks he was wearing for the day. Wear the same ones.
People were trying to get me to do that. But he walked out for the first preseason game, and he goes, "You look good, man." And thanks, guys.
Thanks. So do you.
I was like, "Yeah, you look great." But yeah, so I mean, it's a running joke around the building even now. So, which is great. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's not why I got the job. So, but
it's good.
Yeah, no doubt. So.
Well, but yeah, this is like a longer, deeper question. It goes into philosophy. X, Y, or Z player, either side of the ball, off-season programming. What does a week look like? Go into as much detail as you can.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah. Let's have fun with this.
So we'll just speak specifically for offensive mids because I'm heavily involved with those guys right now.
I like it.
So off-season programming, we're gonna be on the field 3 days a week. We'll lift 4 days a week. We're gonna consolidate stressors, kind of like I alluded to earlier, low-high approach, right? It'll be total body, but upper-lower emphasis. Your lower bodies will match up on your high days as everyone's doing. Your upper days will be on the first field day and on the third day, which is an off the field day. We run a 4-day split here, and it is all 4 days. So one thing and that was an adjustment for me here, was we would go in college, you go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is recovery, right? And then Thursday, Friday. Here we're running straight through that because in the off season, guys are gone in the weekend or they're going to go home or do so. If you really want to get all 4 training days and make them mean something, you have to call it front load the week, right? Or give them the 3-day weekend. So that you got to be smart. We're going to be undulated across the week, highs and lows as far as our weight room volume, and then a linear ramp in our field volume on the field as well. So our highest day of the week will be Thursday, which it can be a little bit of a white knuckler for some people. Some people like to get it out of the way on Tuesday. But I like to build to that. And I really believe that if your exercise selection is right, then you're going to be in the right spot. Sure. So anyway, I digress. We'll, on the field, we'll have our first day will be our COD day, and that's flipped from when I was with at EXOS. At EXOS, we would do some COD emphasis stuff on the end of the week because you felt like it was a safe pattern, right? And a small box type of movement towards the end of the week was easiest for us to go through. Right now, we like to do that on the front end of the week as a lead-in off of the weekend, because there's been travel, whatever inactivity that could be an issue showing up on that. That's our lead-in day on the field would be a COD. Then we got our upper identity within the weight room. That's going to be your primary press pattern for me. And then coming into day 2, that'll be our first lower body day. On the field will be linear acceleration emphasis, and then our squat pattern in the weight room as far as the primary strength movement. Then Wednesday, we're trying to bring everything really, really far down to come back and hit that big high on Thursday. So we'll go no field. You'll go weight room, and it's our lowest volume upper of the day. As far as our primary patterns, it can be very neurally taxing. Generally, I'm going to press again. I do like an incline press. I know some coaches aren't as into that, but I like it a lot because you're moving independent. It gets you in some deep elbow flexion angles, but can keep you in a safe shoulder angle. So I like that a lot. Generally, we'll hit that. If we're going to do some vertical pressing, we will do it on that day as well. And then we'll hit some sort of a flush, be it active or passive on the back end. So passive being sauna, Normatec, anything like that. Active being some unloaded cardio, assault bike, first, maybe some standing med ball stuff if we're going to do that. Just drive heart rate up, really flush guys, get them turned over. And then Thursday is the big money day. That's where we're going to see our highest velocities in our sprint. I don't love to use the term max velocity because it doesn't always apply in, field sport athletes. Our longer accelerations to our peak velocities. And then you'll see some angular patterns in there as well. I'm a big believer in angular speed for posterior chain health in football. That was something that I got from Coach Deck at New Mexico State, and we've really just continue to push it with that. That's your arcs, your S runs, all those things. So we really like those. And then coming into the weight room, finishing off, and that's going to be more of a pull pattern day. So trap bar deadlift type of a movement there. And you see that pretty holistically around the roster. It's a safe movement. You can definitely load it. And then I like to hit a tracked unilateral movement on that as well. And then obviously tying back to the unilateral movement on that squat day, that squat pattern may not just mean back squat or safety bar squat. It may be your unilateral pattern as well.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's kind of how things stack out for me. Then woven within all that, you've got your, specific mobility. I hesitate to use the term correctives because realistically it's probably a little bit out of my scope of practice, but mobility exercises really specifically identified and geared towards your position groups or guys within your position groups grouped as an emphasis. Like, for example, your running backs, they all have these huge traps, right? And really struggle to extend and rotate through the T-spine. So you see a ton of that stuff for us. Front hip internal rotation is going to be a big deal for all of us. And then we're going to attack ankle mobility and stability across the week as well. Ankle dorsiflexion being a priority, inversion, eversion. We got a great foot and ankle guy in house. So we're really trying to pepper that stuff in there. So kind of a long answer. I tend to do better with a whiteboard, but yeah, that's kind of.
No, you laid it out well, because I was visualizing what it would feel like to do that week, just like as an athlete. And I really like how that feels, like mentally kind of working through the week. And once you understand too what you're preparing for, that really feels like it suits well to, perform on the field and have realistic expectations for knowing. Because as an athlete, you never want, especially if you like the weight room, you never want to go into the weight room thinking like, I'm going to crush this and suffer somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that schedule really outlines the ability to get after it when you need to, and be prepared to do also where where I guess I don't want to say it really matters, but athletes would say where it really matters out in the field.
Absolutely. I mean, and what I like about the 4 day is it scales well to an in-season model as we start to change some things. We in this off-season program, we have 4 days a week with them. There's a phase 1 where it's just us. It's just strength and conditioning. Then coaches blend in there, and all of a sudden our field identities are gone, right? And it's call it practices and things like that. But our coaches are so great about layering in stress across a week of practice that holistically the volume undulation stays mostly the same. And obviously I get to play a part in auditing that on the background so that we can be adaptable in terms of how we're programming to that. Then when we move to in season, you get some guys who prefer to keep a 4-day or 3 days and kind of cut out that deload day. And just get a lower volume version of that, right? With that, say your practice squad guys. And then your high volume guys can go to 2 days a week, but still feel a low high.
Yeah.
Coming off of a game, going to a low, feel a flush, do all those things, hit your mobility, really turn your body over.
Right.
You get back ready for big practice days and a big middle of the week type of lift.
That's a good point that I don't think I've ever heard someone mention. We've talked to a few coaches that are, doing similar stuff. But yeah, that transition, because there's like a mental aspect to that. Joe and I were actually kind of talking right before you hopped on, that when you go from following something for months on end and then all of a sudden it switches, especially if you're liking it, once again, that messes with you a little bit. I've seen players who are like, they got a lot of confidence from what they were developing in the weight room, and then you shift gears and they don't like that. Those are the guys that want to start going in and trying to do more. And then those are the guys that end up getting injuries or overuse stuff because like they couldn't do it. And then they're being sneaky because they couldn't have the conversation about it. So yeah, I think it's a bigger deal that coaches maybe don't put emphasis on is, that transition and making sure that it flows well and it feels similar, and guys transition well into it, because there's a big mental aspect that goes with that, feeling prepared to do your job, and knowing that it's there. That confidence is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like what you said too about incline. A lot of coaches don't like incline pressing. I gotta be honest with you, and I've talked to Dustin about this, talked to other coaches about it as well. Come to football, I mean, unless you're getting ready for the combine or your pro day, I don't see a really huge need to get uber good at a bench press versus a 30 to 45 degree like dual dumbbell incline or bamboo bar incline, because that's where they're going to be. If you think someone's going to be standing straight up jamming someone at the line of scrimmage in a phone box like that, like just this arch down back, they're going to lose 12 times out of 10. So if you're on an incline, that's where you're living anyway. So I don't know why more people don't do that. So it's very refreshing you say that.
I appreciate it. I totally agree. And going from college to the pro level, I mean, the red-blooded American male lift that we all learn from the time we're 14 years old or younger is bench press.
Yeah.
And we know it and we do it all the time. So there's a cost to that as well, just on some of the shoulder health and things like that. So we want to be smart as far as that, because these guys have been lifting and they've been handling some loads as far as bench press through their college program and things like that. And I understand, again, like going back, I understand that having a big rock upper body press barbell exercise in there, it's important.
Yeah.
But at this level, I think getting them in a more specific joint angle in a safer shoulder position is a really, really good, beneficial way to go. And to your point about the unilateral, it to me, it transfers because we're striking upward. So
that's what they should be doing. I mean, I think the first time I ever thought about that on a realistic level was when Coach Gentry was still at Virginia Tech, and his big lower body lift for them was to do a front squat for a 3-rep max.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand that for a long time. I understand it now. I understand, about I was like 22, I started to get it.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself in that, like, well, like strength is strength and patterns are patterns, but at the end of the day, we're not training powerlifters.
Correct.
You're not training someone to have a 600 pound. Like Larry Allen's a freak.
Yeah.
He benched 7.
Right.
That's awesome. That's incredible. He had an incredible career, Hall of Fame, incredible. But at the end of the day, like, that's really sweet, but it doesn't really matter. And I've had this conversation with athletes before, and Coach, tell us if you've as well that, I've told people, like, I can get your deadlift better. That's not a problem. We can go from you pulling, 450 to you pulling, 6 in the course of like a year and a half. It's not a problem because you never really trained for it. But if you can pull 600 pounds and you go in the field and your play is garbage, why?
Correct.
Sitting there doing the bench press. They get upset, like, we're not driving the bench. Well, I hope you're not doing that same motion on the field, because if you do, you're going to lose.
Correct.
I just don't get it. I think a lot of people are married to exercises, again, because since you were 14, you had to put that plate on the bench. Until you did that, you weren't a man.
Yeah.
And once you did that, you were a man. But it just doesn't translate over as much.
Not when you have the tools to, I don't want to say better stuff, but I would lay out a challenge for anyone. I have never, and I've taken athletes off of all those major rock movements at a portion in their training career. I have never had someone come back weaker to a big rock movement if they're following sound programming with unilateral stuff or single arm stuff, whatever it might be. If they're making progress in those things and everything looks good, I've just never had some pull a back squat off someone and put them on whatever rear foot elevated dumbbells split squats and ever had their back squat go down when they came back after. And, you know, they're not doing it as an auxiliary or anything. Like, they did not touch that movement. They came back. They either didn't lose anything, or most often they were a little bit stronger in those movements. So I would dare someone, if they're following sound programming, and why not? You can kind of manage central nervous system load a lot better with single arm, single leg, whatever it might be. There's a lot of advantages if you're being thoughtful about stuff, but I have never, and I challenge anyone to do a good job and prove this wrong, but have someone come back weaker or perform worse after taking some of those movements and applying those other things.
No, I totally agree. I think, to your point about sound programming, I think it comes from the willingness to load that pattern, whatever the alternative pattern is. Dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat. If you're willing to go and you're willing to load it and push that with the same mental intention that you take to the back squat, you're going to come back and be as good or better every single time. I completely agree.
Yeah. And I think there's a reason, like, for the same reason people got married to some of these movements, they got married to thinking that you needed to train these auxiliary things as an auxiliary, as if that's a thing. Like, you train these movements because they're auxiliary movements. Like, that's not a thing, but people do that, but that's not a thing. And it also, like, you're going to suffer severely sometimes if you really want to push rear foot elevated dumbbell split squat. If you really want to load that the way someone can, like, you put 150 pound dumbbells in the guy's hands that can legitimately do it good. And it's like, oh crap, I'd rather back squat. They'll be saying stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a college trick of mine with men's basketball. I don't want to trap the deadlift. I don't want to trap the deadlift. Okay. We're not going to trap our deadlift. Here's what you're going to do instead. And then it was a split squat. Oh, it's so heavy I can't hold it. It's okay. I want you to use the straps. And guys got better, and then they come back, trap our deadlift, and be better at it, and then feel more comfortable doing it, and it circumvented the whole system.
Yes, there's so much value in that right there. And that's, man, it's such, make your problem your solution. I'm always trying to find stuff like that where you can take your problem and turn your solution. The best one is the guy that shows up late to the weight room, which I doubt you have this issue, but that's the guy I always make the person's going to check everyone in on day one. Guy that shows up 10 minutes late, guess what? You're going to come early every day and be the guy that checks everyone in. And it's so strange. It's a weird nuance. Every time I did that, it's like the guy had a sense of pride, like, oh, I'm important. Like, I need to do this. And then it blew my mind. Because they were actually usually a little bit lazy and, like, didn't take things serious. And then all of a sudden, like, no, this is kind of a punishment. But all of a sudden they got this sense of pride of being the person that checks everyone in. And I'm like, I continually did it, but it blew my mind because it didn't make any logical sense why that was working.
The obstacle is the way, man. Perfect.
Human beings are crazy things sometimes.
But you Zach, you hit that word on the head, the intent of actually doing it and actually loading it and actually doing that quote unquote auxiliary as the main lift. I mean, in the last year or two, I've been doing that a lot with athletes and myself, and that's huge. That's one of the hugest things. Like, a lot of people think that you have to. It's a squat, bench, deadlift. It's a clean. It's a snatch. If you're into Olympic lifting, like, you have to do that. You do that first, and you do everything else after. But, like, do you have to? That's the beauty part about, our what we love to do, is that there really are no rules. If you can justify it and you get positive results with no injury, then roll.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one thing that I think is helpful with some technologies, velocity-based training, to drive unilateral intent. It is helpful to make something for velocity. I want you to move that faster. You're moving that with ease. Let's load it. I feel like that's useful. And then athlete education is the other part of that. And I mean, we've already kind of alluded to it. We're fortunate here to have a really collaborative, educated roster of players here that understand what movements feel good. And then, okay, if that feels good, let's load that. And they'll drive it the same way. So, but I think that's paramount.
Yeah, you made mention of angular speed being good for posterior chain health.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little more in depth and give us like an example on how you would progress it?
Yep. So sticking with a arc run, so half a hoop, we've done some. So first off, why it's important. It's important because the most injured play in the NFL is the punt play. And generally the most injured player on the punt play are the gunners. And the gunners are the two people on the edge, and they get generally around somebody trying to jam them at the line, and they run down the sideline, sprint down the sideline, speeds 20 plus mile an hour. They are leaning into contact. As soon as I shift center of mass over this inside leg, I've got more stress now on my left leg than my right if I'm leaning to my left. So putting them on that angle and starting to strengthen in that pattern, one, is going to inoculate the hamstring to the stress. Two, my glute and hip power on that single leg side, it's almost like a single leg sprint movement or a single leg bias sprint movement, is going to increase. So we want to put them and inoculate them to the stress. How we're progressing that, you can run. So it's easiest to run symmetrical arcs. So just have a radius all the way around. Mm-hmm. And we've done 10 yards in height by 20 yards in width. So your radius is always 10 yards around, and progressing that with intent. We're not at the point where we're using GPS to say we want you at this miles per hour on that, but we are using some time just to give guys a gauge. This should take you 3 seconds if it's a sprint, right? And then doing some longer from call it a tempo type intention, where it's front side mechanics, driving the knee, and it should take you 9 seconds. And we call it the super arc. That's basically the width of the football field in an arc. So it's a 25-yard radius as far as that. So we start with 10 by 20 and then progress in terms of speed, progress in terms of intent. And then while we're building that, on another day, you have your super arc as far as tempo, getting that. And really, you're not progressing intent on that. It's just pattern. The other side of that is an S run. And generally that is a much smaller arc with a little bit more change of direction type flavor. I have to shift my weight more often through that. You can get higher speeds in that, but I don't think that you get the same stress inoculation from that.
Sure.
I think that's more specific to call it game speed type stuff.
Right.
Was there any sweet spot of volume you found that when you get to like this amount of doing this work, it starts to translate over, or you have players telling you they feel better when they're doing that?
I haven't had either of those things. Our top end amounts, we're getting 6 to 8 reps in total. So 3 to 4 reps sprinting each direction.
Okay.
On the sprint work. And then we've done as many as 9 reps of the tempo arc. That's been our top end. Now, as far as data backing that up, we implemented this in the off season. And again, like, there are a million great things that have been done on the field with our skill and mids group so I can't say that it's because we did angular speed, but I do believe it helps. Okay. And we came out of OTAs with only 1 hamstring strain injury, and it was, in my opinion, a high workload injury, and it wasn't an angular. We had 0 injuries on the punt play specifically. Okay. So I believe that our injury data speaks to that.
Okay. Okay. You don't like, would you ever load that? Like whenever anyone do anything non-linear, do you ever have them load anything? Like wear a weight vest when they're doing anything?
I've never done that. It's not a terrible idea. We've talked about contact, just like a perturbation at the top of the rep or through a period of the rep, because it's not just leaning, right? It's hand fighting and things like that as well, to just make it a little bit more specific. But then with the finite amount of time that we have, I don't think that we're ever going to get to that progression. And generally that shows up in a special teams practice as well.
Right. That's what I was going to say. If you can have those conversations with coaches that are running those drills on the field and start to influence, I guess, what you're doing. Hey, this is what we're doing. You could make it a little bit more specific to what they're going to see on the field. But once again, you're always just trying to close that gap. There's always other stuff you can look at. Yeah.
Well, Coach, we've had you on for over an hour now. I know it seems like we're peppering you with questions constantly, but we do want to get you up. I know we have things to do. I have one more question for you. Dustin, do you have anything you want to ask the man with the plan here?
I can always come up with one.
Oh.
Always. I got to, believe it or not, I have a giant list of 50 questions that I might never ask. I guess we can go with the traditional one that I do like to leave because I'm interested. Okay. I guess we've talked a lot, especially in your sports science side. We've talked a lot about stuff, so I think this is appropriate. If you only get one piece of tech to utilize, or maybe you're a high school strength coach, you're looking for someone to invest in something that you only get one thing that's going to add more value to other than just coaching on the floor. What do you put your money in?
A bar tracking technology.
Okay.
But I think that to drive intent, to monitor load, and self-audit programming, I think that's if I'm a high school strength coach or I'm anywhere, they're becoming more and more affordable. And then from my standpoint, say I'm at Carson Newman and I don't have an on the field tracking technology. I can measure central fatigue with a bar tracking technology and squat jump type exercise weekly and start to use duration on the field and central fatigue in the weight room. And I have my bar tracking technology. It's where I started, so it's where I feel most comfortable. Sure. But I also think that it's the most affordable and reliable piece of tech for the money right now.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. And then Coach, mine would be players at that level. If you could only work with them one day a week in the weight room, in season, out of season, what does it look like? Run us through it.
Straight weight room.
Yeah.
There's zero field.
Zero field for now, because let's just say that they're running enough, they're doing enough in practice, they're conditioned.
Perfect. Okay. I'm already trying to shake. So we're gonna get our primary power exercise, really seeking that high wattage output. So we'll load that in the most friendly way possible, but it's gonna look like a lower day. So your trap bar pull, your clean pull from the rack, your hang clean pull, things like that. And that's gonna be a low volume but high intent. And really seeking high peak velocities out of that. Then we're going to hit a lower body squat pattern. It would have to be unilateral at that point because my power movement is bilateral. Yeah. So I would hit a unilateral strength movement in the squat pattern. You got to hit your posterior chain stuff. Within that, I tend to lean towards some hip dominant, but if I'm doing something like a hang clean pull, I've got a hip dominant load on the hamstring. So then I might sneak in some knee dominant, eccentrically driven stuff in there for your hamstring health. Want to make sure that I'm pressing. So it would be my incline press and I'm doubling up on my pulls. I'm hitting weighted pull up, big believer in overhead strength from a traction shoulder standpoint, overhead pulling, and then hitting a unilateral row pattern for that. And then for core, I'm probably going to hit an anti-rotation movement and then something that the players call abs. We'll do that as well. And then we'll probably finish with shoulders, arms, biceps, and triceps because
you have to.
That you have to. You have one day a week. So that would be my day.
Okay. That incline press, what do you prefer?
I like dumbbells for that.
Okay. What angle do you prefer?
I like 20 degree right now.
Okay, so not much.
not much.
Like the second notch, really. Like
correct, like a notch. But when I get here, and then the angle of the curve of the hand is that perfect upward motion.
Yeah,
I like that as well. And then when I'm at the bottom and I'm headed the dumbbell on the deltoid, I'm even with my body.
Okay, gotcha.
Give the man an award. We asked that question a lot.
Yeah,
that was my favorite answer.
Well,
I'm very
that was really
biased.
good, descriptive, and clear.
Well,
and clear code, and like does everything.
No, it's
backtrack,
completely biased. It's because it's the one I like the best. That aligns with like what I would do.
Oh, well, I'll take it either way.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. Luckily, I don't know. I feel like I don't know that many people that are on the show will listen to that many episodes. So yeah, no one will know that was the right answer.
Yeah,
they won't change their answers in the future.
I doubt it.
They won't. It'll be fine.
All right. So, Coach Zach Witherspoon, I would actually beg to say Super Bowl champion. Coach Zach, there you go, Coach Zach Witherspoon. 100%. Thank you for coming on today. We would love to have you on, especially during the season, possibly during the bye week, just to get an inside look on, hey, this is just what an actual in-season for professional football looks like. Really in depth. If you have time. Yeah. Love to have you on again.
I'd love to circle back. I've loved talking with you guys. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.